The journey enjoyed being in New York so much, we decided that we're going back to the Catskills. We're going to be with a good friend, Jeremy Dicesare, and he and I started hunting together through Bob, family affiliation there, and he's been hunting with us for several years, and I mean, it's just been a pleasure to meet him and spend time with him. He's got a lot of things going on. He's been able to hunt all over the country, even in different continents with dogs, which is definitely something that we've talked about. But we are going to talk about a hobby, passion that Jeremy has, and we're going to dive in since deer season's right around the corner. You bow hunters out there and muzzleload hunters. Jeremy's got a Bavarian Hound, a lot like what we use in some of our tracking here, in the law enforcement side of it. But he's got a Bavarian Hound that he uses to basically recover animals. The termination or technical phrase for it is deer recovery, but I think we're just going to bring it down to blood tracking because that's how everybody sees it. That's what we think we are actually tracking. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to break it down. Jeremy, how is everything in the great state today?
Hey, Heath. Everything's good. It's a hot one. Luckily, I'm looking at a little bit of rain. Hopefully cool things down. Unfortunately, we didn't get to run bear hounds today just because of the humidity and heat. But hopefully the forecast is looking good for the next weekend.
Should be cool. Well, I can't believe you ain't up at the lake sunbathing up there like you do when we're up there hunting.
Oh, man. I missed a hell of a weekend last weekend.
Yes, you did. Well, I know the things we do, right?
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure seeing you though when I got to see you this past weekend. But yeah, sometimes you got to take care of some family stuff, mix it in. But
well, we were definitely giving you a hard time on that mountain Saturday morning. Trust me.
Yeah.
If your ears weren't burning, then you was too far away. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
But Jeremy, we're going to break down today and talk about your Hano Hound. We're going to talk a little bit about the hounds that you've been a part of and been with, and some stuff that you've seen other places. But just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, how you got into doing what you're doing. Just give us your background. Let the listeners know who you are.
Yep. So, I'm 28 years old and basically been hunting my whole life. You guys listened to my Uncle Bob last week on the journey, and basically he's my mentor and really the guy that made dogs a part of my life. So at a very young age, he had a pack of dogs, like part of Heath's stuff, and I got to go a little bit when I was young and just really enjoyed it. But at the time, he was also very into the Chesapeake Bay Retrievers.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the start of my dog experiences and work, and training itself and actually working dogs was with the retrievers. And unfortunately, right at the beginning of 2019, I lost my last Chesapeake, and things were just the ducks around here just weren't really, they're not like they were back in the day. And it's a lot of work to have a retriever, not to really have a whole lot of ducks in front of them. So I was actually in a trip to Europe the past 2 seasons that year, and I got to run some really cool dogs. And I ran some Dots hounds, wired hound Dots hounds. I got to run with the Bavarians over there, all for deer, basically red stags, fallow deer, wild boars. And I just fell in love with the Bavarian Mountain Hound when I was there. The first one I saw was in Portugal, and he had wound dressing all over his face, all beat up. I'm like, what is this dog? And he only stood they only stand up to your knees. So I'm like, what the hell is this dog doing? So my guide was actually French, but he spoke pretty good English. So I go, what is this? He goes, Bavarian Mountain Hound. Good dog. He got in a fight with Red Stag, which I don't know if people know, but they're pretty equivalent to an elk.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he got right in a toss with them, and I was like, holy crap, these dogs are badass. So I got kind of the itch for one, basically, and I knew that I could utilize him. The more I did some research, I knew I could utilize him in the hunting season and deer season, which there's plenty of deer here in upstate New York. And believe it or not, Uncle Bob had a connection with a man named Martin, who I became friends with and actually knew him in the past, just didn't know his connection with the dogs. And we started talking, and lo and behold, here's my now 2-year-old dog, Hubertus is his full name, which is the patron saint of hunters. And it's been just a pleasure working with that dog. And I guess I can owe it all up to a little bit of bear hounds and Uncle Bob.
Right. People don't realize, I mean, Bob is a wealth of knowledge. He's very humble. He's very honest about what his dogs are doing. And he's very quiet. If you don't know him, you're probably not going to gain a lot of that knowledge because he listens more than he talks. But it's always, somebody around us has been one of those people that have kind of mentored us or, nudged us, encouraged us in certain directions. Like I said, I didn't really realize that, until we were talking, he and I talked about it, that, we started back in the late 90s, along with several other people from New York, Rodney Galusha, and you got Ben Gadway and, Anthony O'Neill. Anthony was kind of my first person that I ran into in New York. And, those guys are still some of my best friends. I mean, how you get relationships and it kind of ebbs and flows. I mean, a certain group comes into your life at certain points in time. And, those guys have been consistent for over the last 20 plus years with me. And, I'll tell a quick story. First time I ever went to New York, of course, that was in the mid-90s, 96, 97. It could have been 98. I had Frosty. Yeah, I don't know. It was in that time period. Now, I had done a lot of traveling inside the United States. I was running the Purina circuit, and I was coon hunting in a different state, in a different town, pretty much every other weekend or every weekend. And, I was taking a week off to go to plot days. And but all those communities were pretty rural communities that we were hunting in. So when I got the opportunity to go to New York, I'm like, New York's got bear? That was my first thing. Like, what? And then, so I was like, oh, okay.
It's not just concrete.
Well,
tree them in a skyscraper.
Well, that's exactly what was going through my head is like, where are bears in New York? And I guess in my little countrified hometown, 1,700 people mind, that I'm like, okay. So I got the invite. I went up with Bill Wickham and went to, that's where I met Rodney Galusha. And I went up and hunted in the Adirondacks. And on my trip up there, after I got out of Pennsylvania and started into upstate New York, I mean, it was dairy farms and mountains. And I'm like, wow, I haven't even seen anything that looks like a city. Mm-hmm. So that was my first venture to New York. And I was overwhelmingly surprised at the country and how much it was like at home as far as like the people and, like I said, it was country, there was dairy farm. I mean, just the same things that I had been raised around. And, so that was my first trip up there, and I've pretty much been going almost every year. There's been a year here and there that I've missed or whatever. Ever since the mid '90s, I've been going because of the relationships that I have with those guys. And now, Jeremy, you're into that relation. You're a part of that now too. So, yeah, I enjoy it. And like I said, the people that listen to the podcast with Bob Melville, Bob is a wealth of knowledge. And I've said it, and I'll keep saying it. It's so good to be able to have people like that to bounce ideas off of, to bounce problems and troubleshooting off of, and sometimes just sit down and talk through problems with. And Bob is one of them people that I have those conversations with. So,
100%.
Yep. So,
and he's, I've in one of the podcasts, I don't remember which one exactly, but one of the guys was on, and if you, as a younger guy in the game, you just show somebody like Uncle Bob or even you the effort, man. Like once you're under their wing, the sky's the limit. You don't want to don't take advantage of that, and just keep working hard and be, if that dog's on the top of the mountain or there's trouble or he's out of town, not in baiting or whatever, just step up to the plate as the younger guy. And there's some great guys in our community that will help you out and make you a lot better person and a lot better hunter in the woods. And, that's just what's great about it all.
Yeah.
Having Uncle Bob in my life.
Yeah. So go back to when you first started hunting with him, do you remember what dogs he was hunting?
Yeah, I believe he had Pete and Abby.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he had some other stuff. I believe at the time, he had some of your stuff. Frank from Maine, from Maine,
Mm-hmm.
used to be there a lot.
Yep.
With his plot dogs. And then, I was like that right in high school, and I did go quite a bit, and I enjoyed it. But when he stopped running the bears, we kind of got out of the hounds a little bit altogether, and that's when like the Chesapeakes were the thing, and that's when he really put the hammer down. So these past few seasons was where Uncle Bob's got back into the hounds. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, yeah. So Abby was out of my ring dog. She was a daughter of Ring. And then Pete was out of the son of Sackett, so he was a Sackett bred dog. So when Bob quit, basically his work and flying all over the country to do the job, he had to make a decision. So I ended up with both of those dogs. And of course they both died with me, passed away, and they were a little bit older when I got them. I can't remember if Abby was 8 or 9, 10. Pete wasn't so old. He was 6 or 7. But so those were some of the original dogs, and that's why I ended up back with them, is because of his job. And then through the years of talking, we had been talking about it, and he said, Heath, as soon as I can get to where I can retire or I can semi-retire, I'm getting my hounds back. And I was like, yeah. All right, well, so that tells us, you got into hounds, you've been hunting, for 10 years plus with them, and the Bavarian hound. So we have, and I know they've heard me say it on here before, we have a Hanoverian hound. We call him a Hano. And it looks like, I say it's a wiener dog on steroids. But for you plot guys, they have a lot of colors and resemblance of a plot, except they're shorter and longer. They have that hot dog style body, I think, of the wiener dog, and that's why I aggravate Robbie. He's our handler for hours, and I aggravate him to death about it. But he calls his Jekyll, and you and I had talked about it, and so tell us how you got the dog. He come from Did he come from Slovakia?
Yep.
Okay.
So, and Martin, Martin is a dual citizen in Slovakia. So he's actually imported some stuff here in the past for people. And, he was a gun customer of ours. So he came into our store and never really talked about dogs, but he ended up helping me get the whole. He was actually over there, checked out some shows for me, and ended up picking a dog that he really thought was going to be someone that was going to be a special dog. So there was a little bit of that process of picking out a puppy, and like, I'm just kind of on the phone. I don't speak the language. He's kind of like, we're not really sure if this is the breeding we really want to send to you. There was almost like a aura of like they wanted to prove a point that there's going to be a good dog that comes from Slovakia. Like I would be like, Martin, are they getting ready to ship, or have you guys made a decision on something? He's like, oh, wait a little bit. There's word that there's another good breed, dog going to be available. So it was kind of a little bit of a process. Eventually, kind of the stars aligned, and they ended up getting the dog, and he came to JFK, which is about a 2-hour drive for me down in the city. And I'm at the import office, and here's my little puppy, and kind of hit the ground running. I got him right in September, and there was the September season, and one of my close buddies shot a bear right that second week. And I'm like, well, let's see what his reaction is to a bear. He was a 5-week-old puppy, or no, well, older than that. He was a 12-week-old puppy at that point. And he was a little timid, and he had, like you said, they do almost have like a little bit of that wiener dog look. But he kind of showed a little bit of interest, started tugging on the ear, and I was like, well, that's a start for something,
Mm-hmm.
Just to see that interest in the puppy, and like that he wasn't too shy of it. Just like when you're picking out a bear hound and you're looking at them like when they're a puppy, like you see those certain traits in them that are like, that might be, it's a crapshoot really, but to a certain extent. But hey, there's the chance of a really good puppy there.
Yeah.
And in Europe, there is a very stringent, testing and stuff that they do for
go through the process. Yep.
And a lot of people in America are kind of unaware of that. The Bavarian Mountain Hound Club in Europe, they have legit like wardens, they call them. What's the way it translates to, and the bitch isn't allowed to have more than 6 puppies, and they're only allowed to breed twice in their lifetime, and every dog has to test before it, in the field test before it can breed and be a proven winner, and all. It's a pretty strict process there. It's like a lot of your guys' police dogs are probably from Europe.
Yep.
So it was a very cool thing that I kind of just, from seeing that first Bavarian in Portugal and not really knowing what that dog was 100% yet, to like kind of getting thrown in the ring of like all this information on how like serious these guys are about these dogs. I was like, not to say that like every single one of them is going to be a Ferrari, but they put a lot of effort into their breeding program. And when that dog came, he definitely proved himself to me a little bit. Not to boast about I don't mean to, but he has shown a lot of promise for a very young dog. So I'm very excited to see how he's going to continue to grow.
It's kind of like what Bart said in his with the breeding program. When Bart was younger, he said, we didn't really train our dogs. We just took them and they did it. And you have the same same outcome from yours. And you had mentioned something there earlier that I see in that bloodline. And I'm not going to say your Bavarian is the same as our Hanno, but they are a little bit timid. I don't mean that as far as like they have a bit of cautiousness about them. Ours is like how do you say it? There are certain things in the environment that it'll take him a minute or two to work through, where the shepherds or the Dutchies, or even the labs will just push right through it. He's a little bit more cautious. But again, his trailing style is slow and methodical. So he's not pulling you down if you have to step over a log like our pointy-eared dogs.
Yep.
So when you said that, I'm like, okay. So that is. Now, do you know a little bit about the breeding program that he come from, or any of the tests that they do to qualify these dogs?
Yeah, so they do go through like the European. I'm actually going to try to pull up his pedigree here for you, just to kind of look at all the information from it. So he is part of the Slovakian. I can't even pronounce it, but for short, the SKJ. So, and his papers, all the dogs, when you look at his sheets, they all get tested, and they're all like, not like field, I guess almost like a field trial.
Mm-hmm.
His dad is 2-time CAC, which is like their part of their aptitude and like their all that kind of testing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know 100%. I'm going to be hopefully going over there, and maybe we can revisit it. Unfortunately, with the war in Ukraine, we're kind of like pushing it off a little bit, but this time of the year, right before their season for the rut for Red Stags is September. They have a lot of dog shows, and they have a lot of those field trial kind of tests. And I'm really itching to go see it in real life. But from what I understand, it's a lot of it is a 20 for breeding stuff. I believe it's a 24-hour-old track with some of them do, like, I believe the requirement is about 8 ounces of blood is really what they go off of. And a lot of the guys use deer hooves on shoes, deer shoes. I don't know if you've ever seen that setup, but it's a European style. And basically they walk through the woods with a hoof attached to the heel. And that's how the track is laid. So once they have that, those credentials, the commission of, their clubs and stuff will approve a breeding. So then it kind of gets, from my understanding, gets posted that, hey, I can't even pronounce a lot of these dogs' names, but the female, his mom is named Betty. Betty is able to breed for 2020. So they'll find a sire that is equal the credentials, and they make it happen, I guess. So it's kind of it's cool to hear the process. I'm itching to see it all. But to speak from my little bit of through translations and stuff, that's kind of the gist.
Yeah, our dogs it's twofold. Depending on where we get dogs from, most of them are PH titled. They have to have a PH1 title. And of course they bring them over. And then of course we have kennels that we buy the young dogs from, the 6 and 8 month old dogs from, but those dogs aren't vetted. And so yeah, I completely understand the process, and I really wish that we would do more of that here, to encourage the betterment of the breeds that we have.
Yeah, I actually, me and Uncle Bob were kind of talking about it, and because I was mentioning that, we mentioned coming on the show, and there could be a lot different type of hound dogs around if we had the European mentality. And I think, not to touch on like some, the Europeans they don't take it a joke. They're more worried about the breed than they'll call those two dogs and just, it is what it is. In America, we're a little softer, I believe, which is kind of our downfall in the dog world a little bit because, well, Joe Schmo breeded to Betty Bop, and now we have two crappy dogs in the blood line, and that one dog might be okay, and he might tree a coon or tree a bear and be all right dog, but when he breeds again and it's two pretty ugly ugly bloodlines, it doesn't really do anything for the next guy that ends up with one.
Yeah, that's a fact.
And you know that just as much,
Yeah. So in that pedigree, can you tell if there's anything that's kin in that pedigree?
I do know that they do want like that.
Okay, if they line breed, normally, and I won't speak for that particular line because I don't know, but normally there'll be a dog in the first generation and the third generation. They have to skip. So is that looking like it's par for course there?
I'm trying to see real quick if I see the same name. I know they usually do.
Yeah, they have to skip a generation.
Yeah.
And again, that was something else that Bart talked about, is having that, the coefficient. You want that coefficient not to get closer than whatever. I don't remember the ratio he said, but I'm thinking off the top of my head, it's like 35%, and I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, they usually have to skip a generation to do that. So
yeah, and I really do wish I'll come back on the show with a little bit more knowledge. Hopefully, in a year or so, I'll be able to get over there and kind of speak to some of these guys and have a little bit better understanding. But kind of currently where I'm at with the breed and everything, I'm kind of like the working man with it, and the handler. I did do quite a bit of research, and I did, understand that from my knowledge in the past about dogs, what I kind of was getting. And, like you said too, like that little bit of timidness that breed does have was a little bit of a hurdle. But once he gets locked into what the story is, he's usually, like you said, methodical. Just the Hanoverian hounds, from what I understand, basically the difference from what I have to the Hanoverian is the Hanoverians are just a little bit bigger, and the Hanoverian guys I see do a lot more pig hunting with.
Yep.
Like they're a little bit more of like a bay dog.
Yep, they use them for hogs and bear.
Yep. And so there's no like over there. There's no tree there, so everything's on the ground.
Yep.
So they have bears there. They have all the deer and stuff, and all these dogs are pretty much bay dogs by their genetic instincts. So that was like a little bit of a difference between getting to understand what they were doing once they found the animal and stuff, because I never had, we don't have pigs here or nothing like that, but just a little bit bigger of a dog and pretty similar mentality between a Bavarian and a Hanoverian.
Yeah. I would assume by just looking at them and looking at their dispositions that, and I really don't think yours is any smaller or bigger than Jekyll. I mean, I think you and yours and Jekyll they're the same size. Yeah. So,
okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, how did you talk? Just kind of walk us through real quick the training process. I mean, I'm not an expert on blood tracking by no means, so I want to learn a little bit. You know, listeners learn a little bit. I mean, like I said, deer season's right around the corner, guys. So I see a lot of people picking up. I'm not saying this dog, but dogs to track wounded game and recovery. So how do you start the process? Is it like we do with the hounds, or is it a little different?
It's a little bit different. It's definitely, like you were just saying, it's definitely, there's a lot of guys that are starting to do it. I'm not saying that they're doing it to like perfection, but what I'm hoping to be doing. And deer season as across the country is a very serious business. And if a guy shoots a giant buck, you know, they want to, and they can't find it, they want to, and they're going to call somebody. I want to be that guy. And there's a lot of local guys and a few organizations that I'm a part of. United Blood Trackers Association is a big one that we have. Within New York State, we have the New York State Deer Search, and they're all places that you can go to find a tracker like me. Basically,
So you're contracted out by the state?
A little bit. There's like, they work very closely. So basically when Bert got here, we started out with a liver drag, which I know some of the, it's a little bit different, but basically very short intervals, nothing crazy. Like like 10, 15 minutes at a time. And I would put a liver on a string.
No.
And I'd tie him back, and I get him real excited on it, and kind of like tease him and taunt him with it. And I would run across the lawn with it and see him.
No, I was going to say, when you're saying, because I know this dog, like I know the style. You know, these are the dogs that you need to amp up because they're so laid back.
Yeah.
Like they are laid. I mean, you come home, they lay on the front porch just like the old timers. So creating a little bit of excitability is what you're saying, and that kind of grabbed my, like I said, that grabbed my attention. I'm like, oh, you know, sometimes Jekyll just lay down. You literally gotta, come on, buddy, get up, let's go. It's time to go to work.
Yeah, that's like stereotypical bloodhound, you know, that just lays on the front porch. And when you're talking to the European, like at least my connections, they pretty much call them their bloodhound. They, you know, he says bloodhound when he talks to me. He doesn't say mountain hound. He says bloodhound.
Yep. All right. So you drag a liver.
Yep. So get him, and you know, he picked that up really quick. If anybody's ever, if you think about it, and if you've ever had liver, or obviously you've been around, everybody's pretty much been around liver. It's actually very kind of aromatic and almost like a sweet smell. It's got like this different smell compared to anything other organ wise. So it's, for a puppy, I believe it's very, what the right word is, but
it's a strong odor.
It's a strong odor, and they go crazy for it.
So now, is this any type of liver, or is this deer liver? Is this pork? Is this chicken?
So a little bit of my theory is deer liver. Yes, that's what I use.
Use chicken liver?
I'm not deer liver.
Deer liver. Okay.
And I'm not sure if it matters, to be completely honest, but for the start of it, deer liver. And then we switched to, he did that very easily. Like he was that little tiny puppy, and it was like, I could try to backtrack it. I would do whatever I could to try to mess him up. And it was just like, nah, you're not fooling me. But he was very good at it. So I ended up switching, and that was very short periods of time with the liver. I switched to, a lot of guys within the community use a hide, like a deer hide. and they'll drip some blood on it. I used a trailing scent by a guy named Jeremy Moore. And that has a little bit of some gland scents from deer.
Mm-hmm.
I used that as mine for my dog, and I had a little bit of blood and some other deer smells. So I would drag that, and then I would let that sit for a lot longer as he started getting a little older. And he did very well with that as well. So now if I go and do a training as an adult dog, I use the shoes with a hoof from a deer that I either killed or I got from a client and left it. I basically freeze it and then I thaw it, and then I'll do my track, and basically I just let it sit there in the woods till he finds it. And I try to methodically think about where I'm walking and try to get out on a spot so I don't backtrack on my track. But similar, I very believe that it's similar to your guys in a certain way. I like to think it's similar to kind of man trail, police work a little bit, you guys going through the woods and that. And he's done very well. And now in the real life, so this is his second. When he was a puppy, I did some stuff for some friends. And then this season for real life, for strangers, and, at the end of the day, going out for somebody's trophy deer that they want to find no matter what. I've gone out there and we've had some really good luck. I have a full-time job, unfortunately, on top of this, so I can't run hounds every single minute of my day, but I found about 20 deer last season for guys.
Nice.
So that was very exciting.
So how do you, let's back up just a minute. How do you acquisition from the liver drags to real life? Like, what was your transition? How did you transition from, of course, I don't want to get into the scent and the environment and the scent picture, but how did you transition into, okay, we're going from this, now we're actually tracking a real deer?
So honestly, it kind of went pretty easy. Like, I really just, I shot a deer myself, and it was opening day of the season. I was getting the deer on trail camera. It was a buck that I wanted to shoot, and I shot that deer. I knew right where he was coming and going, and I shot him the first morning. And my dog Bert, he was just a little tiny puppy, and I was doing the liver drags, and I was transitioning from them to the hide.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was actually doing, I was wrapping the hide with the liver, kind of dragging it. And I'm like, you know what? I think this dog, he's doing so well just on that. Let me see with a deer that I know I smoked. Let me see what he does. And
how old was he?
He pretty much locked right in, and he drove that track, and he found that deer pretty damn quick. Like, I mean, the deer was smoked. Don't get me wrong, but he ran that right up, and I never really want to say that I really ever had to like transition really from anything. Like, the big thing with what we do is also, in my head, I never wanted him to have the excitement of live deer, which we can like circle back to with running bear hounds, right? Like, if there's that, like, if you just let your bear hound run deer and be like, oh, this is fun, that's something hard to break. So I never tried to, like, if a deer was in the lawn as a puppy, I'd go and take him out, or if a deer was in front of his kennel, or like, I would nick him, right? I mean, not nick him with a collar, but I would not let him get any sort of excitement immediately after a live deer. So he seemed very to the point as a very young puppy, and he continues to be that way. And now that he's had these live deer and actual finds, it just continues to be. Obviously, we don't find every deer we go for, but a lot of success.
Mm-hmm.
So that first track that I brought him on, I actually sent you guys the picture for maybe the cover. He was 5 months old. He wasn't really full grown yet. And that picture, he was coming off of the liver. And I bring him up to another track. This is not my own. This is like a deer that actually got shot in the hind quarters, come to find out. And I believe it did hit femoral, but now that it really didn't bleed out like a femoral hit. So there wasn't very much blood on the ground. So my buddy calls me, and I go up there, and we ran that track pretty quick. I said, he's young, I'm not really sure, but, you know, he was one of my best friends. Let's go see what happens. So we get up there, and my buddy had it marked where the deer was standing when he got shot. And they looked for blood and couldn't find any. So I go, all right. So we get up there, and the dog, I let him go, and he backtracked that deer for a little while. And I go, and I'm kind of like, my buddy's standing next to me. He goes, well, this is the way the deer came. I'm like, well, all right, that's fine. You know, the big thing is I go to meet people, and they do not have any clue about hounds whatsoever when I get there.
Mm-hmm.
So the dog backtracked it up the mountain a little bit, and I think he realized, hey, there's none of this other like blood. And a little bit before the podcast we talked about, and I think we're going to hit the point. He comes back off that backtrack and starts really locking in to that deer. And we crossed the little old logging road, and I saw a blood drop. And we kept going and went a few hundred yards, and sure as shit, there's that deer dead. So I don't know, like, for your question of like what transitioned him from real life to that artificial track, I don't know how I could really answer that, to be honest.
Well, I mean,
Because
really,
you got it.
you was able to shortcut it because of his natural instinct. So when you wrapped the liver in the deer hide, that's how you were trying to transition the odor.
Yep.
But it worked out because you was able to track your own deer. And I would think, that's probably what I would be doing is my family members shoot deer. Don't go after it. Let me bring my young dog in and let me see if I can track it for you. So yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for there.
Yeah, yep.
So, and you said he was about 5 months old. I mean, that's pretty amazing. But I do know the quality of dogs that we get from Europe, and I'm not surprised. I may be disappointed at that at 6 months old if I wasn't getting some type of results because of the high quality of dogs that we import. And I had an old timer tell me, he was talking about the deer liver. I had an old timer tell me one time I was feeding. I didn't have no money, and I was feeding whatever dog food I could find, and I was killing several deer during the year, and I was feeding them scrap deer. And he's like, "Hey, Heath, now if you let them dogs eat that deer, they're gonna run deer." And it kind of set me back. I'm like, oh. And then as I got older and understood, I did not. That was not the case. But for a couple of years, he had, I believe that. And maybe he believed that. Maybe he had a bad experience or something like that. But, so I put that to a stop. So I understand why you would try to use deer parts. And I think that would be important in training, especially from, the stuff that I do in the law enforcement world and the hound. I mean, I want to use as much accurate odor and as much real odor as I can. I don't want to subside from that, because then I'm going to have to do some proofing or other stuff to get that dog to where I need him to be. So I completely understand that. So, so you ran him last year, and tell us a time that you know that you and I were talking earlier about him sticking his nose down in. Go through that track. Tell us about that track, and tell us what kind of come of that.
So, kind of just a quick run through what happens when I get called.
Wait a second. So there's two parallels with my work environment and what you're doing. We're always the last ones to get called, and then the second thing is you're running him off a lead. We have to run our dogs off a lead, and that is so hard because I'm trying to read that dog's behavior. And I'm assuming, because I understand the breed that you have, when your dog's trailing, its head down, tail's probably level with his back, shoulder blade sticking up a little bit, that's his profile, means, all right, Dad, I'm on it. Is that a picture that you see?
100%.
Yep. So those dogs trail with their heads track. I don't know, track, trail, however you guys want to say it, track or trail with their heads down. That is a picture. If I'm behind your dog and watching him work, that's what I see with him.
Yeah, and that's why too. Like in the past, I've been able to pick me and you. I feel like I've been able to pick your brain, and you've like indirectly. I'm not sure if you know, but you have helped me out quite a bit. Of like, hey, a quick little tip here and there of, your job and my job / hobby now of finding people's animals, and you're finding people that are seriously lost or in the bad guys. So basically, Bert, I feel like unlike a human, which actually you have a really cool story, I believe, of a guy that was bleeding that you were tracking, but
yep.
And I enjoy hearing that story whenever you tell it. But when I get called in, usually I pick the hunter's brain a little bit. And some guys across the country may have been denied from a tracker coming out, just from what we hear. And we get pretty overwhelmed as a group of guys tracking deer, because there is unfortunately, a lot of wounded animals. So the time frame can be from anywhere from, I get calls sometimes where it's a colorblind guy that can't see blood, which, believe it or not, I get a lot of.
Yep, I can see that.
It's out where I could see like where he smokes them and he just can't see it, and he has got no friends that can come help him. I get old guys that really just call me just probably to help them drag it out of the woods. But really, the time frame that usually I'm there is from 6 hours to 24 hours, give or take. I don't now, when my experiences, 8 to 12 is like kind of like the prime time to be there. Most of the guys listening to the podcast, they know when they've been told all these years when they gut shoot a deer, go back to the house and have lunch or go sleep on it for the night, because there's no point of pushing that deer through the woods. And time's your best friend with this, no matter what. I believe, honestly, a lot of guys could find more deer if they didn't push it and go straight chasing to deer. But that's kind of the whole mentality of, we could talk hours about strategies for deer. But so my situation as a houndsman, usually I come in as the last resort and kind of like a miracle worker, unfortunately. But some guys do understand what dog can do and what they did. But me personally, with my dog, I've had a lot of success. I usually start the dog either at the hit site, if they didn't track through the woods too badly, I like to start at the hit site.
Now, when you say track through the woods, do you mean contaminate?
Yeah.
Like,
yep. So
yeah.
like if he tells me, hey, last night or yesterday morning, I shot the deer. I knew I hit a bad shot, so I went out for lunch, and all my buddies came in, and we looked for that deer all afternoon and couldn't find it. I go, that's like the nightmare, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, you're putting the ball in the other court a little bit, but under my breath. But usually that's the kind of track I start at the last site that they found something, because it's just a mess. You know how 10 humans walking through, and that's exaggerating, but a bunch of guys walking back and forth on a blood trail is just going to make my dog walk around in circles.
And what people don't understand about what you're doing is, gosh, there's so many things that are so similar from what you're doing and what I'm doing. I mean, yes, we interview the people before we start a track. Our interview has to be very, it's to gather information so I can get my team and my perimeter where I need to be. And then, we are usually behind the ball. Most of the time, we do have that contamination that we have to work through, which usually sets us back even further, and the dog's on the lead. And so, for the listeners, I want to paint a picture here. You've got 5 buddies out walking through the woods, looking for this animal. You got to think about what Jeff Shetler says. I mean, you're rolling up leaves, you're turning up rocks, you're changing the footprint of that forest floor or that field or whatever environment you're in. Every step you take, every time that you stop and you stand, like, you are changing that environment every second. And then you have 5 people, and yes, the dog's tracking a deer, he's not tracking a human. Okay, I got that. It's two different scent pictures. But the dog has to work through the scent picture that you created to get to the correct scent. And that is, sometimes it's so time consuming that it literally goes against us, and it goes against our success ratio, because it is so messed up and the dog never could straighten that out. And I don't think people understand how detrimental that is to us as tracking humans, man tracking. And what you're telling me, I'm hearing the exact same thing as far as, that track. So, all right.
And you gotta give the dog a lot of credit there. The mental capacity for him to kind of try to figure all that out, and the human, like, all that disruption in the woods is, I believe, is quite a bit and that's what I consider myself and the group of guys that I'm with and the deer search group. And we're not like Joe Schmo that comes out with, my dog found a deer one time for my buddy, like we're no joke, we're coming out to find your deer, and we're serious guys. So that dog, all of our dogs are very, it's not just like I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we don't just come out of the woodwork, and we.
Yeah, you have imported a dog, and I don't know what it costs, but I know what it costs me to import dogs. You talked about your guy Martin. What people don't understand is Martin was from that country. You said he had dual citizenship, so he was able to get that dog across the ocean to stateside probably without a big fee. For me, I have to pay a broker. I have to pay a broker to be at the airport, to pick the dog up off the plane, to sit in quarantine for however long it takes, and for me to pick the dog up. Yeah. That's extra cost, not counting what I paid for the puppy. I'm paying for the flight, and now I'm paying this broker. Like, that's expensive. And then you've put in time and money. You've invested, like I said, you can't get time back. I don't care how much you spend. Yep. every minute, every hour you spend with that dog, just like us, we can't get that time back. That is a part of our life. That is like the most, the biggest investment you can make is your time. And,
Yep. 100%.
so yeah, I completely get what you're saying. As far as, it's not, we're not run of the mill. We're trying to do something that we're passionate about and be very successful at it. And for us to be successful, it takes time, training, and money. I mean, same thing with our canine group. We train, a minimum of 16 hours a month. Sometimes we get more in. We spend a lot of time on our own. So I mean, Jeremy, I get it. And, kudos to you guys for taking that upon yourselves and doing something good for the hunting community. Because you don't only just track a deer, you track bear too.
Yep, we track bears as well. So, I mean, we do these groups, the blood tracking and the deer search and stuff, these guys, we put a lot of time and effort in. And I would say for the general bit of all of us, we take it very seriously and we take it to heart. We want to come out and find your deer and have high success rates. Who doesn't? So kind of going back a little bit to what we were originally talking about.
Yep.
What separates us from that kind of like, yeah, my dog found one time, I'll help you out, kind of guy, is when the going gets tough, these dogs really put their nose to the grindstone and really they have that mental strength and the push through and figure out problems, just like your police canines.
Mm-hmm.
So a really cool point that I experienced with Bert, and it took me a little bit, and as any handler, when you have that new dog, you start to try to learn, you got to learn its body language.
Mm-hmm.
And I would notice as a puppy, and even now, obviously, every once in a while, he'll just bury his nose right into the mud or right into some leaves. And for a little while, I'm like, what the hell is this dog doing? And it was, looking back at it, and now that I know what he's doing, it was usually in a tougher spot in the trail. And deer have what's called an interdigital gland.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe, which an interdigital gland identifies the specific deer. It's like basically smelling.
It's between the hooves, right?
Yeah, and it's between the hooves. It gives it's an identity gland.
Mm-hmm.
Within the deer community, it allows deer to know who's who, and it's kind of their way of telling, like what I just said, who's who. So now some of these tracks that started getting harder and harder, and not these ones that like I smoked them and I brought Bert out and he found it in 2 seconds with a ton of blood on the ground. Like the ones that were gut shot, they sat for 24 hours and that deer is like marginally hit. He would dive his nose right into the dirt. And this one time he came back up and he had like a little bit of blood on his snout. And it like clicked with me. I'm like, oh crap, I thought he was just looking for mice or, screwing off as a puppy. He's smelling, he's like really being, like you were saying, methodical. And he's really smelling that individual deer, I believe, at that point when it gets tough. I think kind of the stages of this business that we're in, I get out there and he gets started on some blood. Then it kind of transitions to that blood starts to run out. And that's why us as hunters can't find the deer, because we're just sight. So it goes from that blood, and the dog is taking in that whole scent picture, but he's taking that track out. There's starting to be less scent, which that blood has a lot of scent. And now he's really, the scent cone of the deer is starting to fade as time goes by, or it's settling, and everything's starting to be lower. And now he's picking tracks almost. And that's when it slows right down. And that's when I know, as body language, it's starting to be like, this deer has got to be marginally hit, or it's not. Like, you can just almost tell where this deer is going to be hit by how slow he starts to get or how fast he's getting. And that's been a really cool thing to see this puppy grow into doing that and understanding. You guys listen to the Houndsman XP podcast with these, and they talk about the scent thing, and it's all relevant, and it's a very cool thing to have one of these serious blood tracking dogs that it kind of continues my hobby of hunting and running hounds, and it's just a cool. It's been very rewarding to have all this dog.
Yeah, I mean, you're really piquing my interest because I've got too many dogs. I can't have another, but
yeah,
I think that's something that I could train and be successful at. And it really, like I said, it really piques my interest about what you do. And there's so many things alike, from the hound world. You're using a hound. It's a Bavarian hound. We're using a Hanno hound. It's a hound. It's all a hound type, and you're doing so many things across on the law enforcement side, interviewing, like we said, you're trying to work through contamination, and you're doing all these other things. So it's very interesting to me because it fits into both of my worlds.
Yep.
I hate,
and it's a huge, as we all know, the deer industry is ginormous in this country.
yes, and it's $1 billion. I don't know how many. I can't even say because I don't know. But it's a huge industry.
Yeah, and the public that I run into, and they're like, unfortunately, I do believe that there is a little bit of that. Oh my God, you're scaring a bear into the tree, or what is this dog doing with all this equipment on and blood all over his, but they hear that, hey, they get the story of, well, he's finding animals that normally we're just going to go and rot in the woods. And it almost gives to the people that don't understand what we do, it gives them like this, my God, that's amazing that they can do this and save the animals. And, it's kind of like a very cool side of this whole thing to see. The hunters themselves are usually super shocked. As houndsmen, mostly on this podcast, we somewhat, understand what's going on through our dog's head a little bit. I hope most guys have listened to the scenting stuff and understand what the scent's doing. But the average hunter doesn't understand that. And when I find that guy's deer, and I'm that last resort of like, oh, I'll give him a shot, and we roll up on that deer, it's like the joy in their eyes, or like the shock is just that's what makes it worth it. It makes it exciting.
Yes, so, I can totally see that.
And when there's a big old buck laying there too, that a guy, spent so much time and effort in trying to at least get the shot at, and he loses it, and we come in with the hounds and find it, that's it's a cherry on the top. So.
Oh, like I said, it interests me, it intrigues me, and I want to tell a story real quick before we wrap this up about a couple months ago. I was in Tennessee, and I had went down to Guy Fieri's Flavortown restaurant. I'm a big diners, drive-ins, and dives fan. When I'm in different areas, I try to go visit one or two, or whatever. When we were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, we went to one of them there, and let's see, where else did we go? we went to two there. So anyway, I had went down. I know this all doesn't sound pertaining to what we're doing, but it will. Just stand by. So I was in Tennessee with some work buddies. We'd made the trip down to go down and eat at this new restaurant that Guy had put out, and I had to take a picture of the restaurant and Guy standing there saying downtown Flavortown, and I'd sent it on my timeline. And about 30 minutes later, I get a text message from Jeremy, and guess who's in the picture with him? Guy. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And Jeremy, tell your side of that story. I know, y'all were in the airport, but tell that side of the story, and tell us about just tell us real quick about your lynx hunt down in South Africa while you were down there.
So I basically, with a bunch of family and friends, we had a trip planned to South Africa, and the majority of our hunt was plains game. If anybody gets a chance to go do it, it's amazing, the best time of your life. But the particular outfitter that I went with, I followed his, been following his son on social media, and dogs are very important over there as well. And they got a pack of, as I was explained to, it's a foxhound blue tick mix cross. And so I've been out to Idaho and I've shot some lions. I've never, unfortunately, in America, have been able to do any sort of dry ground stuff. I've heard Shorty Gorham's stuff on the podcast, and I would love to go and do it down in South, Bobcat Run dry ground stuff. So I got the opportunity to do it in Africa. The concessions there have a real serious issue with predators. So we were driving through, and one of the PHs actually cut a track for a lynx. They're called caracals there. And they could tell it was a little old. And there's a houndsman that's part of the PH there, the group there. And they knew that I was interested in that. I actually spoke to the owner, and I told him, hey, if you guys get a chance that I can hang out with the houndsman for a day, I would be over the moon. So we ended up getting the call that night, or they met us at dinner that night and said, hey, we cut a track. We're going to spend a few hours and see if we can freshen it up. And it seems like it's very similar to what we have in America, like the bobcat or the mountain lion. They don't go insanely far from if they have a kill, which I believe is what the situation was. So, sure as shit, we load up the dogs. We head out to that area. We spend quite a bit of time looking, and they let one of the dogs go, and they ended up cutting the track fresh, and they kind of piled the dogs in, and we ended up treeing it. And the short of the story is I ended up getting my African lynx. So it was very exciting.
Was their dogs did they open good on the track, and did they tree well with the mix of the foxhound and the blue tick?
They did, yes. And I think that's what they why they brought in the blue tick, from what I understand. Them foxhounds from Europe aren't really treeing dogs. Obviously, that's kind of why we ended up with the dogs we have, because we have stuff that trees. But so they did tree very well, and and then they kept that lynx right up, and there wasn't very much for trees there. And that cat did jump once, and then they treated again, and they held it there that second time. And I was very impressed. The cat was right in their face pretty much, but they kept it right there. So as what Heath was saying, that trip was amazing. We had the time of our lives, and we're flying home, and I saw Heath's post at Flavortown, and I'm in the airport 6 hours ahead of him or behind him, ahead of him, I believe. So I'm sitting in the airport, and I get pulled over for like a random check coming home. So I'm literally the last one getting on the plane. I look over behind me. Here's Guy Fieri loading up on the plane with me, and I know he doesn't really make it super public, but he's actually, as I was explained by him, I spoke to him for about a half hour. He's actually a part of the Kuyu group, the Kuyu brand clothing, and he's actually a pretty diehard hunter. I know how our world is. I don't know if he really, unfortunately, I don't think he really promotes that too much, but he was there on a trip as well, and he was a really actually down-to-earth guy, and we just chit-chatted like we were two humans, like normal people. He wasn't, that guy is one of the richest chefs in the world, and, he just kind of talked to me like I was sitting with him at the diner after a day of running hounds. He was just regular old guy off the street, and it was cool. I really appreciate it.
I am so jealous. Like when you said that to me, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm in Tennessee in his restaurant, and you're in South Africa on a plane with him. I mean, how does this happen?
17 and a half hours from home, and I'm here's Heath at his restaurant, and here I am on the tarmac standing next to him bullshitting about hunting. But that's just kind of how I am. I think I just get into some certain situations, and I've met some really cool people that way. So
enjoy it, because life is short, and it's all about
100%.
relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, I appreciate you taking the time and running down this blood trail. I mean, like I said, it intrigues me. This is something that I could do if I had time, and I may do it in the future. I don't know, but I really, really enjoyed the stuff that's in common that we have. Like I said, on the hound side and the police side, I feel like you're using a hound, but you're using it a lot like the law enforcement. I mean, there's so much commonalities there. So I appreciate it.
Like I said,
I mean, I appreciate it.
That, like,
go ahead.
Oops, sorry.
No.
I believe, like, you may not have realized, but you have helped me quite a bit from that police side of things, just understanding certain stuff that now I use in the field, and certain mentalities on going out and finding, really, if you want to think about it, a being, So
well, the hardest thing, I'm sitting here thinking real quick, the hardest thing, kind of, if I was training that aspect, is slowing people down. Like when you picked up that your dog is sticking his nose in there, and that's when the track gets harder, and telling yourself, okay, he's trying to work through this, and I don't need to push him, because us as humans think we know more than dogs, and we start trying to push them through situations or through places that they're having difficulty, and there's where your mistakes are, especially man tracking. There's where our mistakes are made, or blowing past turns or whatever. So, I mean, like I said, I'm interested now. I mean, you've got me, my brain turning. So,
yeah, and I think a lot of the houndsmen on here would really, I know we all pretty much have a kennel full of dogs, but I think a lot of guys that are serious about it and that are good houndsmen would really enjoy incorporating this into their, repertoire, really, their resume. And it is very enjoyable chasing a hound, no matter where you are in the world, is enjoyable.
That's right. Yeah, just being with the dogs.
Yep, and then the more you can do it, the more the better.
That's right. Yep.
All
right, Jeremy. So we end everything with our little phrase here. Again, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your friendship. I always enjoy coming up and spending 2 or 3, 4 days with you guys, and it's so enjoyable just treeing bear or not treeing bear and just getting out. And like I said, the hospitality is
for you.
yeah, the hospitality is above and beyond. So I truly appreciate it. So at the end of the session, Jeremy, thanks for helping us find a way to teach, train, or learn.